Morning.
Morning,
Good morning, everybody. It's Friday Live here with Bailey and French on all our channels, LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. Really glad to be back. I've had a couple of weeks away from Friday Live here with Ant. How are you doing, Ant?
Yeah, I'm good. I was just admiring that new imagery that we got going on.
We like to play around with the countdown. So a busy week, and this is our opportunity to kind of recap on the week so far. So much is going on every single week now. Just keeping on top of what's going on for us, what's going on with our friends, our partners and our clients. Good morning, Sally. Lovely to have you here with us. Please do send in comments on the chat feed. Any questions? We want this to be an open conversation, and we will be here every single week, as we have been for many months now. Enjoying really just recapping and having a conversation and sharing that with everybody, because we're aware that lots of people are feeling similar, but still disjointed, still dispersed. And actually, sometimes it's really nice to know that other people are going through the same thing. We're not alone. And there's a huge amount going on. So, Ant, tell me what's going on this week.
Yeah, it's there is a lot, and there's a lot of return to office. There's a lot of people returning from holidays with big smiles on their faces. There's also people that haven't gone away, like me, who got stuck because they got pinged. You know, and all of these wonderful things, and also lots of other things. We've got loads of clients talking about management capability and really relooking at the skills using this. I mean, we've been talking about the return to work in September as being a big milestone for a lot of clients for a number of months now. Now it's September, so what's happening? Lots of balance around wellbeing performance. You know, how do we make that balance? Because people are still going to be struggling. It's new environments, it's new ways of working, lots of relocations, new jobs, new teams, new managers. There's a lot of change in people's lives at the moment, inside and outside of work. And I guess that's exactly why we have these conversations every Friday, right? Because we can recap and we can share what's going on in our lives and the lives of others, and maybe share some hints and tips on what we can potentially do.
Yeah, I'm just typing in here a question that's come up whilst you're talking, because it makes me wonder whether or not actually everything we've all been through over the last almost 2 years, has it made us any better at change? There's a lot of change going on. You're right. You know, for me, I'm a mum. It's back to school week, which is always absolutely crazy. Your focus and attention goes on kids. It's also really emotional for loads of parents, where kids are moving into different schools, moving into different years, having been home for some time, you know, not having that little buddy there asking you questions all the time that actually felt really annoying, but now all of a sudden is like a huge loss and it feels like your arm's gone. So, you know, it's a really tricky time. Exactly as you said, loads of people have moved jobs. You know, my LinkedIn feed is full of congratulate people on their new roles. So there's lots of people that have decided to make a switch and try something new, probably because they haven't been out of the house for very much over the last few years. The one thing you can change is your job. There's opportunities to look at it and spend time really thinking about making a meaningful shift. And so, yeah, there's people onboarding others. There's been a flurry of activity in terms of opportunities, certainly in our market around leadership and management. Exactly that. I think organizations have absolutely tapped into the fact that leaders are going to be the reconnectors. Leaders are going to be the most important people in our organizations right now, in order to get people together, make sure everyone's okay, checking in. And then we've got this huge kind of like push on well-being that's been going on for so long, and yet there is also quite an important question here around what are we creating in terms of that culture. Have people got better at change, or are they just looking for more and more support all the time? Is it never ending? Can we please everybody?
Yeah, and we're hearing a lot of that, aren't we? Not necessarily directly, sometimes indirectly, but definitely when I'm speaking to senior leadership, senior managers, just friends of people who are in leadership positions, managing teams. You know, I was speaking to someone the other day, they'd done baking for the return to the office, and they'd done all these sorts of wellbeing supports and check-ins and making sure everything's all right, and kind of going really above and beyond. And then the team kind of didn't seem that grateful, or there wasn't thank yous, or the perception was maybe that there wasn't thankfuls or gratefulness. And I kind of worry that I guess people just generally who aren't maybe team leaders, who aren't in that team position, if you're not showing that thanks and that gratitude and that appreciation for people going above and beyond, and the organization, you know, sending a message to senior leadership and going, actually, do you know what, thank you. And I've seen a few posts on LinkedIn, so I'm not wanting to generalize everyone, but I do worry that what would happen, because the reaction of some of my friends in those positions were just, well, I won't bother then. You know, why should I go above and beyond and really try and make everything an amazing place? Because you don't seem to know that I've done it, or care that I've done it, or appreciate it. So it's been it's been a really interesting thing to be hearing from people.
And it's interesting because I think a lot of that is also fueled by this drive to recruit. Obviously, there's a lot of people recruiting at the moment, sharing their amazing benefits, their incredible new kind of innovative ways and of working in order to attract other people. And exactly that. So people are expecting it. People feel, I guess, quite entitled to actually, my employer needs to look after me much better. And many people have moved for that. And I guess what we're going to see is a swathe of wellbeing surveys come out, because in large organizations, that's the only way you can really get the feedback. If you're not hearing on the grapevine and you're not around in the office to really know how people are doing in terms of their wellbeing. And I guess it still comes back to my question was, have we got better at change? But are we more resilient? Are we more resilient? Have we learned to become more resilient through the last 18 months? There's been so much going on. There's been lots of initiatives to support us in our mental health as well as our physical health. Is it enough? Has it actually helped? And I think I'm hoping to see a swathe of research studies showing all the different interventions and which ones have helped the most. I think that we need to really think about asking questions in different ways. Surveys are, they're quite one-dimensional. No matter how pretty the diagrams are that come out of the other end, we need to do more than just ask people a question of something we want to know. I recently had an experience with an organisation, and I got a really long survey afterwards with tons of questions. But actually, I wanted to tell them about something in my experience that was really important for them as an organisation. But none of the questions tapped into it. So I filled out the entire survey, pressed submit, and thought, well, I actually haven't said what I really want to say. And I think that happens a lot in organizations. So I sent an email to say, by the way, this is actually what happened in my experience. And someone called me straight away and said, thank you. And it was like, great, because it went into the ether. And I'm sure that's happening in large organizations too. And we need to make sure that we raise the voice of the employee, don't we, to be able to say whether or not it's actually fitting the bill, because we'll just lose the budgets for it if there's no feedback, will we? And I know Sally's come through with a couple of points here. What she's saying here, maybe that bosses and leaders do these kind acts, but some folk may not want to be as sociable now. Absolutely, we've been forced to find different ways of socializing, connecting, and being with people. Are the old traditional routes going to work? Certainly in many organizations in Brighton and in other different towns, I'm sure, certainly across the UK, it's a common thing to go out for drinks after work with people on a hard, tough day. How many people are going to want to do that?
And those deeper connections need to be the priority for organizations, not just for the reason that you just said, to really hear them and really listen. Obviously caveating that with also please employees balance that, right? So come up with the solutions because you're part of it. Take accountability and autonomy, and you're part of creation of that culture. It's not a top-down thing, right? But yeah, absolutely. Are people wanting to socialize? Are people wanting to have you created that psychologically safe environment that people feel like they could do what you did, which is send maybe a separate note? Hey, the questionnaire didn't quite do this for me. I just wanted to feed this back. But thank you so much for what you are doing, because it's really making a difference. That those kind of communications are what's needed at the moment.
Yeah. And people stepping into new things too, people trying out new things, people losing the fear. And I think that's really interesting. I know a lot of people have been kind of watching the cases, certainly in the UK, of COVID, and watching to see what's going to happen with the kind of opening up, with schools going back. How are the cases and hospitalizations going to rise? And there's also something there for me about fear can wear out. with kind of boredom and frustration, it can minimize the fear to a point where people start taking more risks. An interesting kind of piece of that is certainly, I know you can't relate to it, but I'm sure many people can, but being pregnant, you kind of, when your first baby, you can be quite fearful of what's going to happen. But most people I know, certainly me included, by the time you get to like 8 months, you are so desperate to have that baby because it's so uncomfortable and it's so, in the way of your operating, and you want to meet your baby, that actually the fear dissipates and it's more the frustration of, come on, let's do it now. And I'm getting a sense of that from the vibe of what's happening, from kind of the social events that are cropping up in my calendar now. So many more face-to-face opportunities coming through. I think people have got to that point of like, yeah, cases are rising, but I'm double jabbed. Actually, I'm going to go for it because I'm fed up with this. Almost like I'm done with the fear. I'm letting go. And people's resilience has been building and building and building. And I'm really intrigued to see how many of those events take place. How many people turn up? Are people going to all, pull out the last minute? What's going to happen in terms of conferences and group events? Are people going to want to be part of large events, or even small group events?
Well, coming back to your question of kind of how more resilient, or have we got better at change, and kind of thinking about that broadly is probably quite difficult. But for myself, have we got better at change? Like human beings generally, actually throughout history, our key strength is that we are good at change in comparison to a lot of other kind of animals and communities in the world. So have we got better at it though, or are we just about doing what human beings do? And we've been talking, haven't we, about how can organizations just help people be more human and create that more human experience, because we know humans naturally are actually quite good at adapting. It takes us a bit of time, and we have to do it collaboratively and with deeper connections, so that we feel like we're not alone in that change, because change is scary. But what you've just talked about there is maybe creating those buddy systems, creating those places, those conversations for people to kind of go and not butt heads, because there's the other side of what you've just talked about. So people being really frustrated and wanting to get back and going and get going and move and be high performing again. And then the ones that kind of, and I don't want to generalize here because there's not two, I think it's a spectrum here, right? But then you've got people who are really nervous about going back and maybe not wanting to go back at all and wanting to completely stay remote because it suits their life and their new lifestyle that they've built over the last 2 years. So there's that real, what are organizations doing to help us be more human and just do what humans do best and kind of not getting in the way so much? How are we just creating platforms for deeper connections, meaningful connections, so that we can get on and do what human beings do best, which is change and adapt and grow and thrive together collectively?
Yeah, I love that, actually, that sense of like, we're not learning new skills here, we're just uncovering what's already within us.
Nice.
And yeah, I talk a lot about that actually in terms of finding your voice, because I think so many people have an inner voice of what they want to do, what they want to say, what they feel is right, what they know is true in their heart, but it's just covered with so many layers of kind of complexity and intricate kind of I guess organizational cultural aspects really that get in the way. And how have cultures changed over the last 2 years? What is going on? How are people keeping connected, staying focused on the things that are most important for organizations? And what are we going to see in the next 6 months? I think I'm always future focused, but I'm so intrigued to see, what are we actually going to see in the next 6 months? Is this the big return that we've been waiting for and been delayed? Is this the big moment where things really start to bounce back and we actually get those messages on the news saying, yay, the economy's really coming back? We're not there, are we? And it's like, we've been there so many times. How do you kind of keep going with like, yeah, okay, and then before you just give up and right, well, I'll just wait for it, but it will happen rather than hope for it. And I had a great conversation with Thomas about hope around that, because there is research to say that actually continually hoping for things that don't happen can cause you some issues. So it's it's really interesting times.
It is, and So obviously a lot of toolkits being created because new managers are coming in, or people having to quickly move into management positions because, people have left, and then people are being moved into management positions, or you've been hired into new management positions because there's lots of change happening in the organization. But lots of toolkits, lots of kind of management capability, how are we actually upskilling people, and the fundamentals. And I really hope that people watching this are going, okay, well, what are the fundamentals? And you always come up with, well, coaching and feedback and, all of those kind of really basic. Please be building in the self-awareness piece, because we need to be unlocking, as you said, and uncovering what naturally gives me confidence to changing, to grow and adapt and thrive into these new scenarios, right? Self-awareness and then other awareness, and all of those emotional intelligence principles, right? Those are fundamentals for people right now, because if we don't have those, we're not going to be building those deep and meaningful connections together. And that ultimately, above everything else, is going to help you to do those coaching skills. It's going to help you to have those more effective one-to-one conversations. It's going to help you with your team roles. All of these things are super, super important, but they're underpinned by the pure human basic drivers and needs. So yeah, I know I'm working with a lot of people on doing that, but I hope more companies uncover that and work hard to build that into how do we as a team and as an individual have those conversations more.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I'm certainly guilty of looking for the next new shiny thing. I love the innovative pioneering of what's the new thing, what's the great kind of opportunity here. To kind of step us forward. Let's keep moving. And I know that can be quite exhausting for people, but it's kind of my raison d'etre. But I like things that anchor me. And I think that's the thing that you're talking about here. For me, it's emotional intelligence. It anchors me. It's such a kind of a good foundational kind of building kind of stage block of being able to say, okay, but we can find new ways of developing our self-awareness. We can find new ways of developing other awareness of really being good at managing ourselves and our relationships. Those things are still the bedrock of actually what helps us in all of these scenarios, hybrid or not. It's still applicable. We are humans and they talk to humanity. And I think it's that universal foundation that gives us the opportunity to innovate. Obviously we hear that, innovation comes a lot from constraints. So having parameters makes you focus on that creativity. And I think that's what we need now, is kind of to recognize the parameters and the challenges that we're facing and think about how can we still create in this constrained environment or this complex environment, because that's really where the best creativity comes from, isn't it? And I think certainly from what I hear, lots of organizations, people have been performing their roles really well, but the creativity has been dropping because people haven't had that ability to spar off each other in the same way. Lots of lovely new platforms that allow you to do whiteboards and things online. It's not the same as a good old flip chart on the wall when you're chatting and laughing with people, is it? And I miss that. I look forward to that so much. So I hope that more face-to-face opportunities to really focus on the valued impact of those in the moment, to be able to create creativity and innovation in this strange new kind of normal is going to come back, really.
Yeah. And maybe innovation, takes form of how that's happening. Because one of the amazing things that the last 2 years and the pandemic more generally is just kind of accelerated the technology. We're all Zoom and Microsoft Teams geniuses and Miro and all of the other platforms that seem to have popped up. But maybe it's kind of taking those same approaches around emotional intelligence, but how are we having those conversations and innovating around those core basics? How are we having conversations about each other's values and strengths and what it means, what our experiences are, what our perceptions of the world are? And actually all of those will feed into, and there's so much data out there that those conversations will have a massive impact on creativity, productivity, on people's connection and the ability to collaborate and trust, even when things go wrong. We were talking earlier about kind of plate spinning. Lots of plates spinning, and knowing that probably some of them are gonna fall off. And actually, when that happens, do you have a culture that's gonna go, that's okay, we can learn, it's okay, we're still together? So I guess it's innovating how we have those conversations rather than trying to innovate something that's this amazing new way of leadership that's fundamental to hybrid learning. I don't really think that that's the case, but that might just be my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think it is important to recognise that. And Sally's coming in with some great points here. Finding the time and energy to learn new technologies with organisations supporting training for this. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, and I've seen so many more organisations offering more training now. So I'm sure it's part of their retention strategy, with quite a significant need to continue focusing on things and letting go as well. Exactly that. You know, a learning organisation is one that lets go of things.
Yeah.
You know, yes, we might have, you know, people leaving who've got tacit knowledge of what happened 5 years ago, but how, you know, it's great. But we also need the new thinking of what can happen tomorrow, and being able to harness that and bring people's ability with that psychological safety to have the conversation and say, actually, yeah, that's really great. And we've innovated that for a while, but we could be doing this completely different thing or different approach. And I keep finding myself, you know, talking about what we're going to be doing, sharing and being quite directive as a leader, because certainly through the last 2 years, that has been a lot of what's required, is guiding, leading, letting people know certainty. But more recently, I'm enjoying actually coming out of that and being much more engaging and much more kind of open to new ideas, and loving being able to say, right, we've got time to actually discuss and debate this now. Whereas actually, you know, 12 months ago, there wasn't time for that. It was about making a decision, making the right decision, knowing that there wasn't many choices, and moving on straight away. And it's that ability to be able to step back and go, it's okay, bring everyone in, make sure that everyone's feeling part of this. Even, you know, it doesn't matter what their role title is, how they can contribute. Everyone's got an idea and a thought. And actually, it's all really powerful. So making space for that. I think that's the learning piece, not just the formal training, but that space for learning together around what we're doing on a daily basis, because there's so much opportunity to improve it, isn't there?
Yeah, and I love that. What I love about that is you've got, we're all future leaders, or maybe not, but we're all part of the future of this organization, whether that future is 10 years or tomorrow. And you're involving everyone. I think a lot of change leadership can be seen as, right, we're going through change and we need a strong leader at the front who's going to give us clarity and clear vision. And that is sometimes the case, but sometimes it's also about having that bottom-up approach. And hey, you weren't involved in this project, but I think it would be great for your learning just generally to come in and learn this piece. Continuously seeking out those opportunities to learn. As we know, when you learn something, you build confidence. You then can take that forward into other scenarios, but you just feel more confident, and that's the point. So if you can create these learning cultures, you're actually creating cultures that are more productive. So when we're talking about well-being initiatives, it doesn't have to be completely separate from the flow of work, right? It's creating those moments for wellness through productivity and through performance. I really like that approach you just talked about.
Yeah, and accepting it as well, accepting that, you know, there's going to be space and time, accepting wasting of time. So that's a really interesting thing. You know, we talk so much about efficiency and getting value out of every single person and the organization, making value and having impact all the time, and we're all so busy all the time. But recognizing that there is going to be wasted time, and that's okay. You know, it's okay in the long run if strategically you're working on the right things, and actually there's time when you've got booster time, when you're actually, you know, accelerating and amplifying everything you're doing, and everyone's in and everyone's on. But actually, you know, there's going to be some of that wasted time as well. And how we use that and how we recognize it and allow for it is going to be okay, because it might be regenerative. It might be actually the restorative time that people need to just slow, because it is exhausting, that continuous on go piece. And it's about being able to allow people who thrive on that to do that, and allow people who need that time and space, particularly for reflection. I think there's a lot of reflection still needed. I think there's so much reflection on what's happened.
Always.
And, you know, there's lots of things that could easily trigger us back into our actions last year, our decision-making processes that don't need to come that way, but actually are happening to us because of the continuation of our focus on the news feed, worrying about what's going to happen next. You know, anxiety is a weird thing. It can come back and hit you in different ways. You know, how are we able to just notice those things, make space for them, and allow them to be, and then just move on without it having to be something that is dominating our kind of a whole day or a whole week. Sorry, going off in one there, but it's like, it's just, I think there's some important pause time. And at this point in time, with so much going on, that's really hard for people. So where are they finding their pause time? So it can be something really, really small. So in terms of my pause time, I have a book that I bought in the pandemic, and it's a poem for every day, and it's literally got the date poems for every single day. It takes me less than 20 to 30 seconds to read a poem, but it's my one moment of, it's okay, there's other stuff going on, there's the world, things continue, you know, there's still flowers flowering outside, there is stuff happening, and it's all okay. And that's my pause moment. I know some people are putting in, you know, opportunities to do meditation, etc., but how do we find that pause moment, however minuscule, in the crazy hectic schedules we've got in front of us this September? I think this is a month for that pause time to be elevated. Even, as I said, those minuscule, we talk about nudges, we talk about micro actions. This is mini micro actions. What can we do that's going to give us that moment of, okay, just breathe, just
it's the kind of stabilization, isn't it? It's the get off the treadmill for just 2 seconds. Hang on a minute. Let me just check in. Am I okay? Is everyone out? Let me just look up for a second rather than just running. Let me just look up. Is everyone else? How's everyone doing? What's the landscape here? And okay, we've got this. We're still moving. We're still here. We're still progressing. And maybe we're not progressing, but that's also okay, because we're progressing maybe in a different way. And okay, now I'm at a place where I've taken a breather and I can go back on that treadmill. I think that's really important.
Well, I just think it's just incredibly hard. I think it's very incredibly hard for leaders as well to just say, you know, my head is full. Like, actually, right now, I don't have anything to say. I'm just gonna stop, or I'll come back to you on that. It doesn't have to be right now and urgent and immediate. And I think often we think it has to be right now and it has to be good, because otherwise it's just going to sit on our to-do list. And it's just going to be another thing we have to come back to and make a decision. So there's no point in coming back to it. Make a decision now. Actually, by the time you come back to it, it might have disappeared. I find that's really interesting as a leader. Sometimes some things that aren't urgent and important can sit there, and they can percolate, and they can become and change and be something quite different. And I've had that a couple of times. I've written some emails this week and I've gone, actually, I'm not going to send that. I'm just going to wait. And I'm glad I didn't, because actually now the whole situation's changing and morphing, and there's something different that needs to be focused on. And it's that kind of just pause. Is it all right here, immediate, in our faces? Can we just take a breath? I think that's certainly struck me this week personally, but I know it's happening, because I know when all my friends go really quiet, they're really super stressed and really busy. So, you know, it's like, oh, that back to school week, and then you get pictures on your WhatsApp feed of, you know, glasses of wine and gin and things, and it's like, oh my goodness, people are really, you know, looking for ways to share their hecticness, it's happening. But yes, we've come to the end of our live session today.
It goes quick.
I really want to obviously send that message out to everyone who's focusing on looking at quite a busy September, is just look at what are going to be your mini micro moments, what are going to be your anchors that can just give you that lift to go, breathe, it's okay, we can focus on this, we can do it. And yes, I know that plate might smash, it might not carry on spinning, and that's absolutely okay. I've told all the right people, everyone knows, and these over here are my priority, and they're not going to. And it's that what are we going to allow to be in the way it needs to be? And I think that's quite an important message.
I'm going to take that message away. I know that my team are watching this going, Okay, so where's our moment? So that's another reason I love these conversations, holding me to account.
I will. So look, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Sally, for being so interactive. I hope you have a great Friday. Join us again next week, every Friday, 8:30 UK GMT, for Friday live sessions talking about all things humanizing work. Have a great first week of September. Take care.